So I'm going to talk for a bit about healing from the fear of rejection. Most people have this fear. Most of us grow up fearing rejection because we were rejected as kids. We were rejected at home and school, with authorities, peers, siblings. Most people experience a lot of rejection. And when we're little, we don't handle that well. We take it personally. We think we're not good enough. We develop all the false beliefs about I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Other people are better than I am. I don't look right. I make too many mistakes. I'm inadequate. I'm not worthy. I shouldn't be here. I'm not important. A lot of false beliefs that we establish in our wounded self when we get rejected. There's no way, or very little way, maybe as a child, that we're not going to take rejection personally, especially when it's from family or parents, people who are important to us. I only read one time, I think I mentioned this before, I read one time about, it's a true story if you haven't read Mr. God, this is Anna. And she was found at 4 years old by a man named Finn, who wrote the book. She ran away from home. And she was a very enlightened little girl. And it's the only time I've read about a child knowing that the rejection, the abuse, she was badly abused, had nothing to do with her, that it was her parents, they were crazy, and she had to get away. But the rest of us probably didn't leave home at 4. I certainly didn't, and took it personally when we were rejected. The problem is what happens, excuse me. We have so much smoke here in Colorado from fires. It's certainly affecting my voice, and I'm sorry. So what happens is that we incorporate into our wounded self our parents' wounded selves, as I've talked about, and we continue to reject ourselves in the ways that we were rejected. We treat ourselves the ways that we were treated. And so whenever you're putting your wounded self in charge, you're rejecting yourself. Anytime you tell yourself, oh, I'm not good enough, or what's the matter with me, or, oh my God, I made a mistake, or I'm inadequate, or whatever the judgments are that you have in your wounded self, you're rejecting yourself. You're rejecting your essence. And this is one of the most important things in inner bonding, is to connect with your higher guidance and learn to see who you are in your essence. Learn to see the spark of the divine that you are, that we all are. Spirit didn't make any mistakes. God didn't make any mistakes in creating you. You are a spark of love. God is love. We are created in the image of God, which is love. So your essence is love, and you have your individual gifts and talents, your ways of being in the world that you were born with. And think about if you had an actual child who was like you are in your soul, you might think that child was, you might think you're so blessed to have that child. And that's how you need to start to feel about yourself. As long as you let your wounded self continue to judge you and ignore your feelings and give your inner child to other people and numb out your feelings, you are rejecting yourself. You're abandoning yourself. And when we do that, we continue to take other people's rejection personally. And then, of course, we're afraid of it. If you're judging yourself and rejecting yourself, you're going to fear others' judgment and others' rejection. And there's no way around that. As long as you're doing that to yourself, there's no way to not fear it from others. But I assure you, because I know what happened for me when I started to learn who I really am in my true soul self. Everybody is a spark of the divine. Everybody is extraordinary. Everybody has gifts. And when you really embrace who you are, then you naturally stop taking other people's judgments and rejection personally. You realize that they're just projecting onto you how they feel about themselves, that it has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. Because if they were seeing and valuing themselves, they would see and value you in your soul essence. But the fact that they may be rejecting you or judging you indicates that they're operating from their wounded self. Now, the other thing about rejection is that most of the time, if somebody is rejecting us, they're not rejecting our essence. They might not see our essence. They might not be able to. They may be rejecting your wounded self. Now, one of the things that everybody has to accept is that our wounded self is not likable. It's not lovable. Nobody's going to like our wounded self. I hear so often in relationships where somebody's been operating as their wounded self, and they say to their partner, well, you just have to accept me as I am. No, nobody's going to accept you in your wounded self. The wounded self is no fun to be with, is incapable of love, is often mean, angry, controlling, rejecting, resistant, but it's not who we are. But if somebody is rejecting you, they may be rejecting your wounded self if that's where you're operating from. And you need to accept that, because the wounded self is not a lovable part of us. Now, if you're really operating out of your soul essence and you're being all that you can be, you actually might be rejected for that by somebody who's operating out of their wounded self and who's threatened by your personal power. This can happen a lot, where somebody might be threatened by your success or your creativity, your brilliance, who you are in the world. Unfortunately, there's a lot of entitled people in the world who want to maintain their position of entitlement, and they're going to be threatened by you becoming all that you can be. And so they might reject you. They might judge you. Now, that's when it's really important to not take it personally, because that's about them. That's about their wounded selves being threatened by you being in your power, by you manifesting yourself. And so, again, you don't want to take that personally. Now, one of the things that's extremely important in terms of managing rejection, one thing is it never will feel good. It's always going to create some heartache. I mean, rejection, unloving behavior from somebody else, judgment, rejection doesn't feel good. And so if you're operating as a loving adult, it's not going to hurt your feelings because you're not going to take it personally. If it hurts your feelings, it means you're taking it personally, but it could hurt your heart because that energy doesn't feel good. And so you want to be aware, oh, there's some heartache here, and move into compassion and say to your little girl, oh, honey, I know, or your little boy, oh, honey, I know that person's unloving behavior hurts your heart, but I'm right here. And you bring in compassion and you acknowledge it, and it will move through you. But the other thing is that your inner child, your little girl, your little boy needs to know that you know how to manage rejection, that you know how to manage other people's unloving behavior. So I have come up with basically 3 things that we can do if somebody is being angry, rejecting, in any way unloving. And this depends upon the relationship. If it's, for example, your partner, you have to know whether that person responds to compassion or touch. For example, somebody who's being angry and blaming, sometimes if you put a hand on the shoulder, hand on the arm, and you say, honey, I'm right here, you're not alone, they will soften. but you don't want to respond to what they're saying. If somebody is judging you, they're in their wounded self. You can't argue with that. You can't get into a dialogue about that, because the wounded self, you can't get anywhere with the wounded self. It's a very low frequency, lower brain aspect. So you can't get into whatever the content is. If somebody's angry, somebody's blaming, somebody's judgmental, you can't get into that. If it's somebody you love and you know that they're going to respond to affection or warmth or compassion or touch, you can do that. If you think the person will be open to learning, you can say, you seem really upset. I'm here, I'm listening. Are you willing to tell me what's really going on? They might soften. They might let you in on what's happening. But if it's somebody who, maybe you're at a party and they're not close friends with you, or they're not open to learning, or they won't be open to warmth or affection, then the thing to do is to lovingly disengage. And your inner child needs to know that you're going to do that you're not going to stand there and argue with them. You're not going to get into your own wounded self. You're not going to defend. You're not going to explain. You're not going to try and get them out of their wounded self. You're just going to say, this isn't feeling good, and walk away, and then deal with the heartache. So those are the three main ways that a loving adult can deal with another person's rejecting, blaming, attacking wounded self, another person's judgmental wounded self. Now, all of this takes practice. It takes practice to stay in a loving adult state, especially with people who are important to you. It's not easy. It takes a lot of practice to not get hooked into your own wounded self, and somebody's blaming you and attacking you and judging you and rejecting you and threatening you or whatever else they may be doing. And sometimes the only thing you can do, if you can't get into a loving adult state, is to lovingly disengage. And that means lovingly disengaging means that you're not withdrawing, you're not punishing, you're not saying, oh, fine, I'm not going to be with you. And you pull away with anger. This is not that. This is like taking your inner child by the hand and getting him or her out of range of hurtful behavior. Like if you had an actual child and somebody was being mean, you want to take the child by the hand and get them away. Well, that's what you do with yourself. You take your inner child by the hand, you get yourself out of range of hurtful behavior. And then you make sure you haven't taken it personally, that you're not judging yourself, that you're not thinking, oh, if only I did this or I did that, then this person wouldn't be acting that way, which means you think you can control their behavior, which you can't. And you're bringing in a lot of compassion for the heartache, because there's always going to be a hurt heart when people are mean. And it's really important to differentiate between hurt heart and hurt feelings. Hurt feelings means you're taking it personally. Hurt heart is natural. We're going to feel that whenever people are being mean, unloving, rejecting, judgmental. It's never going to feel good. But it's up to us to take responsibility, not to get them to do it. They're not going to do it. They're not going to take responsibility for hurting your heart. That's our job to do that. Now, if you're in a relationship with this person, maybe later you can come back, you can talk about it, you can find out what was going on. You can then let them in on, that's hurtful to me. It hurts my heart when you do that. Can we find another way to deal with these issues? And over time, that might happen. It's not going to happen all at once, because the wounded self wants to control and has been addicted to controlling for many, many years. But if you're with somebody who's open to learning, then all of these things can change. This week's episode is brought to you by the Inner Bonding Masterclass. When you join this membership, you'll be part of a compassionate and supportive community who understands what you're going through and who will help you throughout your healing journey. The Inner Bonding membership is created to provide laser coaching for you and others in the community who may be facing the same struggles, so that you can practice the inner bonding process more effectively and apply it to your life. You also get to vote on the topic that we will focus on in our bi-monthly masterclass. This way, you and the community will always learn about and get guidance on the topic you're requesting most. Go to innerbonding.com/members to join us. You can use the code BENEFIT to get a 10% discount on your registration at checkout. Again, go to innerbonding.com/members.